We need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops market.
The suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
On Buffalo What's Next this morning, we're speaking with Nakia McCann. Nakia, Buffalo raised, Buffalo native, is the host of the NPR podcast Embedded, Buffalo Extreme. Nakia, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Nakia, we have to talk about this. It's an interesting merger of a couple of experiences for you. One is your involvement with B.A.S.E, which is the Buffalo All-Stars Extreme dance team, cheerleading team, more of that. But also, the NPR people reached out to you as well for you, asking you to take on a real tough topic, and that is, of course, talk about the May 14th massacre at the Jefferson Avenue Tops. Can you kind of explain how this all came about?
This all came about because I originally did an interview with New York Magazine, and I had like a short, literally like not even a full paragraph entry into it, and Miriam McCann found it and she read it and she was like, I love this girl, let me try to find her. She reached out to Ayanna Williams, which was my cheer coach at the time, and then she also tried to reach through my school as well to try to find who I was, because I didn't really put my name out there anyway. So she went on that search, and she just kept pushing and pushing until I finally said yes.
And let's talk about who you are. Just let's go back a few years. Born in Buffalo?
Yes, I'm born and raised in Buffalo.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school at Tapestry Charter High School.
And now you're a college student.
Yes, I am a college student. I go to Virginia State University. I'm entering my third year there.
And it's also added a little bit of a complexity to this whole putting this podcast together, because you're a college student, you're talking about things in Buffalo, and of course NPR headquartered in Washington, D.C., so that made for things a complicated way of doing it. Were you, when they first contacted you about maybe doing something like this, what was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was, there's somebody better. I felt like there was somebody that can be more deeply connected to it than I was, because I didn't directly lose anybody due to the May 14th shooting. So I was like, there's better people. There's somebody else. Like, you can get somebody closely related. Like, I don't think I'm a good person for this, and I really haven't been into any media. Like, all I know is cheer. So I'm like, how can I speak about something like this and turn it into a podcast? So it was a lot of months of like, I'm not really sure. I'm not really comfortable. I don't think I'm the right fit.
At the same time, though, the gym where you worked out, where B.A.S.E was out of the base, for B.A.S.E, we should say, was right in the neighborhood. And also, if I'm not mistaken, put you in the neighborhood on May 14th. Talk about your experience on that day.
On May 14th, me and my mom were actually supposed to go to Tops before we went to B.A.S.E. My mom ended up taking 2 or 3 wrong turns, and she was like, you know what, forget it, we're going to go to Tops after we come from B.A.S.E, because we were already late anyway. So, when you're late, nothing really goes according to plan. Yeah. Things just keep, kind of snowballing. So, honestly, by us missing those 2 to 3 turns and only under like 5 minutes, and us getting to B.A.S.E, we missed the mass shooting by 5 minutes. We could have been in the parking lot, or we could have been inside of Tops as well. And then as soon as we got to B.A.S.E, from missing those wrong turns, and we immediately got in there, like not even 5 to 10 minutes later, like a B.A.S.E parent was like, we need to lock the doors, we need to close the doors, because there's a mass shooting at Tops. And Tops, the way that Buffalo is set up, there's a lot of different ways that you can get to the store. And by going to B.A.S.E, you can honestly take a couple streets and you're there. So on that day, it was a lot of just shooken up emotions because it was like I could have been there, and then we just took that initial reaction of fight or flight, and we locked the doors and put the girls in a room where there were no windows.
Let's also talk about that. I mean, you're a college student and a coach for B.A.S.E now, but like you said, the girls were there. These are in some cases some pretty young kids, right?
Yes. Most of our B.A.S.E starts at about 4, and you age out at 18, which is your senior year of high school. At that time, it was our registration day, so we had girls and parents coming in and out all day. There were new girls and old girls as well. So that day, when it happened, B.A.S.E at the time was made up of all glass windows. You can see in and you can see out. So we were kind of in that situation where it was like, we don't want anybody to see us. We don't want anybody to know that we're here. So if somebody does, like, there was like, we didn't even know if it was one shooter or two. So we were like, we don't know if anybody could come over here. So we locked the doors and we put them inside the gym because the gym has no windows. And that was scary because it's like you don't really prepare for that. And then it's little kids asking you those common questions like, what's going on, or like, what's happening? And it was like, we don't have any answers.
So how did you handle it with them? I mean, were you trying to put on a brave face, or could they see that there was something
I had to
wrong
definitely
here?
put on that brave face because when I looked at my mom and then I looked at, Coach Yanni, their faces were blank. Like, they didn't really know what to do. And that put shock and fear in me because I'm like, this is my mom and this is my coach that's been coaching me for so long. And usually they have the answers. Like, I can ask them most of the dumbest questions and they'll have the best answer. And I was looking at them and we were both looking at each other like, kind of like an eye contact thing. Like, what do we do? Kind of talking through eye contact. And it was weird because I'm like, I'm a child, still.
Right.
I don't really know what to do. And at that time, I just circled them up and I just let them express what was going on. What did they think was happening? Because it was like, we can't really go out of our way to fully express what was going on because we don't even know what's going on ourselves. So I had to put on that brave face and be like, I have to suck it up and try to keep this still a fun day for the girls because registration day is a fun day. So we tried to keep it as orderly as possible without trying to still sugarcoat it a little bit. So I had to put on that brave face that was like, if nobody else is going to step up and say or do anything, then I have to.
It's interesting because where you're just talking about first being approached by NPR about doing something like this, you're saying you weren't really affected, but you really were affected. I mean, you were right there. You were right in the middle of all these young children and trying to make sure that they stayed safe as well. So it shows you that, and I think it's obvious for the most part, but just how widespread and impacting in this community that incident at Tops was.
Yeah, and I never really realized, like, that I was a good person to do it until I actually sit down and I break it down. Like, it's kind of weird because it's like, you don't really prepare or expect, to have to be brave or have to put on a face and be like, especially with a whole bunch of kids in the room, and I'm a kid as well. So I was looking at my mom like, that kid in me, like, what do I do? Like, what's next? Like, those rhetorical questions came up a lot.
Right. We're talking with Nakiah McCann this morning. Nakiah is the host of the NPR podcast Embedded, Buffalo Extreme. It's, I guess, a way of, I'll describe it my way. You can try to correct me here, or please correct me. But the podcast is, in one way, it's a look how the impact of 514 was through, though, the activities of B.A.S.E, this cheerleading dance team as well. So we have a full year that has gone on since then. And so that's what the podcast does, right? It kind of takes us through all of that, right?
In short 3 episodes.
Yeah, and so B.A.S.E, things have changed for B.A.S.E since May 14th.
Have a lot, yeah.
Talk about it. Like, you were talking about the location that you were at on May 14th, 2022. B.A.S.E isn't at that location anymore, right?
B.A.S.E is not at that location anymore. We are not on Main Street. We are at a different location. We are on Michigan now. It's still kind of close, but it's not as close, from before. That gym is way bigger. This gym feels like ours a little bit more. We have our name on the building as well. We have a B.A.S.E logo. When you walk in, it's just B.A.S.E everywhere. It was like that before, but it was because last time it was kind of we crammed our little B.A.S.E love into one building, and then this time it's like that love just radiates through the entire gym because it's just so big. Like the girls have 2 floors now instead of 1. The dance studio is basically completely separated now, and there's more materials for them to get better skill wise, and this location is better. And we don't really, some of the kids to the location change doesn't really remind them of staying over there of Main Street because Tops is so close. In order to, sometimes some of the girls where they live, in order to get to Main Street, they have to pass Tops. You don't really have to do that anymore going to Michigan.
How about for you? You're a coach now for B.A.S.E. When did you get involved?
I actually been coaching since I was a part of B.A.S.E, but it wasn't really like a thing. Like it was kind of like on some playing type of thing. It was like like I'm seeing my mom do it and my coach do it, so I kind of wanted to do it. But now it's more of a thing where it's like I'm actually serious about it. I'm very invested into the girls' skills and home life outside of B.A.S.E as well. Coaching was never really. I always said I want to be a choreographer, but I was like, coaching, no. Because I see the way it stresses my mom out, and my coach that I call my aunt, so I was just, coaching wasn't really my thing, but I did take care. I take care of the babies now.
Okay. Now let's talk about your coach, who you referred to as your aunt.
Yes.
She is the
Yes.
leading force behind B.A.S.E,
Yes,
right?
she is.
What is her name?
Her name is Ayanna Williams.
And Ayanna, the part that I was listening to, interesting about how often your team would go to competitions and unfortunately was often judged or perhaps cast aside because of skin color. Is that right?
Yes. During the time when B.A.S.E started initially, it was 2013, 2014. So around that time, there was no representation of black cheerleaders or black cheerleaders, so it put us in the mind space of, we don't really belong. And then we also, when we got there, our confidence rocketed down. Because
Really?
there were teams that gave us a side eye or a dirty look. There were comments also made about our skin color or our ability. So there was things that was just it's a black team walking in, the black girls are here. It's a thing that is just kind of when you look back at it, it's a child shouldn't have to go through that when all they want to do is come here to do one thing that they love, that everybody's coming to do, which is to cheer. We had to go there and kind of put on a face that was just it doesn't affect us, but in reality, we would sit down after that and be that's not right. That's actually very wrong. There was times that we also have judges that were our moves were too provocative just because of, some of the girls' shapes and, that we just have a natural groove. So, there was just things that were just out of place, and it didn't make it any better because we were young. So now that I was getting older, I'm this is not right. We come here to cheer and people are looking at us like we don't belong.
And so you were younger when that first happened.
2013, 2014.
You have it in perspective to a certain extent now, but maybe just like you said, your confidence went down?
Yes. My confidence for me went down because I really didn't grow into my skin color until I got older. So when I was younger, that just made it even worse because I was already kind of insecure anyway because there was no representation of black cheerleaders. So you're going to a competition where you don't see anybody that looks like you, and then everybody's looking at you like you don't belong. So it's kind of why should I keep cheering? Or why should we be here? Can we try to find competitions where it's more black, black cheerleaders or black coaches, even a black judge? There were times where we went to competitions where it was just we didn't see no color, and we're just big elephant in the room. That's just how it felt for us a lot. During 2013 and 2014, it was really hard for us.
I liked what you said, though. You hadn't yet grown into your skin skin color at that time. Can you talk to me about that a little bit? Take us through that if you don't mind. I mean, I know this is very personal.
I don't mind. When I was younger, growing into my skin color was kind of hard for me because I do have another side of my family who is white as well. And given that I always kind of been like, the oddball because of my skin color. You're around all these people that don't look like you. And just my confidence in general, and also social media. We didn't have social media where it was like, black girls were praised, your curls are beautiful, you look beautiful. So if you see negative things like that on social media, and then you are also going to an outlet, which is Cheer at the time, Cheer was my outlet. And then I'm also hearing those, backhanded compliments where it's just like, oh, you're pretty for a black girl. You guys look actually really good in that red. And it was like, do you really mean that? Like, like what does that mean? Or they'll be like, I'm glad we have a team like you guys here. And it was like, what do you mean? So those backhanded compliments, and just the low self-esteem at the time too, because I'm young.
Right,
I'm
you're
not
at that age where
understanding.
things like that.
Things like that are weird. I'm just like, what's really going on? Like, I'm here to cheer. Like, we talk about how I could do a hill stretch and you could do a cartwheel. Like, why are we basing this around black versus white? And at that time, I just felt unconfident. And then also at the time, B.A.S.E, we do pride ourselves of natural hair. Like, if we didn't have braids, then we had our puffs. And it was to the point where I was like, I don't even want to wear my hair. I just want to get it braided up for the whole season. Like, just keep it braided, and that was also discouraging for me because I didn't know how to handle my color or my natural hair. And it just kind of made me, like, insecure because it's like,
Sure.
What else do I have to look forward to when I go to a cheer competition? I get looks because of my hair or my color, and that just put me down even more.
So what made the difference for you as time went on? You just grew up, or or were there significant, like maybe a person or something that you saw or read or anything like that?
Auntie Yanni, honestly, because
Really?
It was like she was a loud person in the room. I've never seen anybody that can rock a mohawk cut at the time with bright red lips and red, white, and blue eyeshadow and own it. Like, it just be red, white, and blue out. And I was just like, she used to wear her hair out all the time. So I'm like, why shouldn't I? This is
So
my
she's
coach.
a role model for you.
Yeah, she's definitely a role model. She's not only just my coach, she's my aunt. Like, we've built that bond, on the mat and outside of it. Auntie Yanni and also my mom are definitely responsible of why my self-esteem is a little bit higher. They do preach. They were preaching to us like, your skin is beautiful. My beautiful black girls. Like, you also hear that in the podcast. She's been saying that for years, and as I was getting older, I started to feel it a little bit more because we were going to competitions where it's like, okay, we see a black team, they're kind of far, they came a little far, but we see them. And it was like, more representation definitely just made me more confident as well. Because it's like, I see you, you see me. We would cheer for them and they would cheer for us. So it kind of felt like a connection type of thing. And then Auntie Yanni and my mom just put it into perspective to us when they were coaching us that, we are beautiful. We come here for one thing. Your skin doesn't define your ability on the mat, But let me just tell you that you guys are beautiful. So they definitely put that into perspective for me.
And what's your mom's name?
My mom is Trina Washington.
All right. So there are a couple of characters on the podcast.
Yeah.
But the team is also there are characters from the team, and there are a lot of nicknames on the team, including you. You have a nickname, right?
Yes, I do.
What do you go by?
Sometimes it depends on what the situation is.
Okay.
Sometimes you might hear my name, Big Baby. That's one of them. I definitely do take that sometimes. You definitely hear Kai or Kaya. Honestly, my aunt calls me her niece, her beautiful black niece. That's what she'll call. Or sometimes, it's on occasion, my mom won't call me by my name. She'll flip our name. Sometimes she'll call me like Auntie Yanni because we always say Auntie Yanni has a daughter close to my age as well. And we both say, like, we're switched at birth. I was supposed to be Auntie Yanni's daughter, and her daughter was supposed to be my mom's. Like, in a good way, because it's like I kind of act like her, especially in a coach's way and in an athletic way, and her daughter acts like my mom, and coach in athletics.
Hey, back to Auntie Yanni, I'll just call it. What kind of coach is she? She's someone that pushes hard all the time, and then a soft glove afterwards. How does she go? How does she do? How would you analyze her coaching style?
Auntie Yanni's coaching style, honestly, to other people, it sounds like she is the Wicked Witch from the West, but she is not. Like, she has her reasonings onto why she pushes us so hard, and I've always said this. Like, I'm extremely grateful for the way that she has pushed me, because there's some days where it's like I don't want to go to class, I don't want to get up, and then I hear her in my mind like, "Get up! Like, you need to get up," and I'm just like, okay, let me get on my high. Like, let me get up. Auntie Yanni is definitely one of those coaches where it's like you definitely have to get used to her yelling. She yells a lot. I'm pretty sure if you heard the podcast, you can hear that as well. But her yelling means well. It's not like she's yelling because you're initially like you're horrible, you're in trouble. It's like, you should be worried when she doesn't yell. Yelling is her definitely like her love for you. If she doesn't yell at you, it's like, okay, let me try to do something to get back on that yelling side. Some people like to be on the good and bad side, and I feel like with Auntie Yanni, her yelling side is her good side. So she's definitely one of those coaches that's gonna push you and want you to be the best you can, not only on the mat but outside.
Let's talk then about some of the other characters or members of the B.A.S.E team as
Yes.
well, and some of the nicknames that we have out there. Tell me about some of them.
We have Hamster. We have a couple like Mike's daughter. We have a couple that are just like Susie with the good hair. We also have a couple Sallys. Honestly, Auntie Yanni just blurts out names and that just becomes your name. Honestly, it's like I'm just gonna answer because that's my name now. Sometimes she'll often forget your real name because she calls you your nickname just so much.
She sounds like a real coach. A lot of coaches
Yes.
I've known over the years are like
Yes.
that. Yeah, it takes a little time to get to
It
know
does,
and
it does.
appreciate what they're all about. We'll get right back to our conversation on Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
We're talking with Nikiah McCann this morning. Nikiah, a Buffalo native, going now to Virginia State University, but also the host of the NPR podcast Embedded, Buffalo Extreme. If you're just joining us, the podcast talks a lot about the B.A.S.E team, the cheerleading and dance team here in Buffalo, but also reflects us back to May 14th and how it has impacted so many people here in the community. And they've kept Nikiah very busy here over the last year. We talked about how things have changed for the team, but the podcast takes us through a lot of the ups and downs of the team over the last year, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So let's review a little bit. We're going to encourage people, obviously, to go check out the podcast for
Yes.
themselves, but give us a little taste of what went on for B.A.S.E over the last year.
For the last year, B.A.S.E has honestly been through a roller coaster that's just nonstop. The first roller coaster was the mass shooting, and a lot of our girls live in the surrounding areas of Tops, that east side area, just common areas. And a lot of our kids also do either live directly, across the street or 2 blocks down. Given that, a lot of our girls either one stopped coming because it was just like, there's a lot
coming?
of, it was just a lot of high emotions going on for a lot of them. And then, aside from the mass shooting, Auntie Yanni decided to close that gym because of safety. And there were girls coming up to her like, I don't want to come back and I don't want to be at B.A.S.E if we're going to be at Main Street. And she was just like, I was already looking into a gym, so let me just get this together. But you can't just open a gym in a day and expect it to up and run, regardless if you have 100 girls or 20, and given that we moved gyms for 5 to 6 months, they didn't have a gym. They didn't have any mats. They couldn't train the way that they were supposed to, and they couldn't get ready for competition season. So it also set them back for competitions. All-star cheers all year round, but for them this year, it was very, very cut short because they didn't have a gym. And then during that time, we went back to square one, which was the crucial center for us, which is no mats, hardwood floor. We had to share the gym with the dancers and the cheerleaders. And also it being just a community center, we had to share it with other people. So it was like, there's about 150 people coming in and out, whether that's for cheer, dance, or just the community in general. So we had to go back to that. And then competition season came. in the first competition, you know, it was good, but you know, we knew they could be better. But there were just things that were definitely in the way because their mental still wasn't in it. There was a couple girls on the senior team that couldn't compete because their academics. There's a couple people on the senior team.
Academics? So
yeah, their academics were in the way as well.
oh,
You know,
so
it
Auntie Yanni
was
wasn't going for
definitely.
that.
Oh
huh?
no, Auntie Yanni and my mom were definitely not going for that. And you know, they had their fair share of that, and we also had the overcome the fact that these girls were not okay either. You know,
Right.
we expect children to move on because it's like, you know, you're a child, you don't really understand or you don't know. But in reality, just us prepping them for future and success, we definitely had that turn around and blow up in our faces. Those girls are very emotionally intelligent. And that's what I've learned doing the interviews, that they were truly impacted through it as well. That's what I learned throughout this year, not just from moving.
So let's explore that a little bit, if you don't mind. What were some of the things that they were saying to you?
The interviews were kind of hardcore for me because, you know, I'm usually in the hot seat of being a big sister, you know, for them, or like just looking up to them in general, you know, them looking up to me. But in this situation, I was kind of more on the side of actually listening and talking to them, not only about cheer, like, oh, like, do this to make your jumps better. Now it was like, you know, how are you? You know, what's going on? Like, how do you feel?
And were you picking up on cues where people were? Sometimes we say, "How are you?" and you know, you might get, "Oh, I'm good."
Yeah,
Or I'm all right. Or I'm all right.
those are the answers that I get. The normal, basic answers, which is, you know, I'm fine, I'm cool, I'm good. And I was just like, no, I had to definitely kick in those podcast things, you know, those interviewer things, which was like, you know, oh well, why do you feel fine? You know, like those. I had to keep coming back with questions with them because just one worded questions weren't working. Like, you know, just the how are you, and then I got the blunt answer of, oh, I'm fine, and it was like, no, you know. So I had to keep pulling that out of them. I just had to keep asking questions back to back to get the answers that I wanted, which was, I want you to tell me what's really wrong. And then it also just made it way better because I'm their big sister. It's not like they're talking to like my mom or, you know, Auntie Yanni. They're not talking to a parent. So they were way more open as well. You know, some of the interviews like Milani, for example, it only took like one interview and she was full on open. But there were other kids that were just like, you know, I have to keep talking. I have to keep going. You know, we did interviews with Nicaire like twice, 3 times because it was like the first interview was just so like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. And I'm just like, that's not how I know her. That's not how she sounds. That's definitely not how she performs either. You know, I just had to keep coming back. It was like, you know, I'm not going to give up. And I know that they feel some type of way because it showed through their cheer performance. So.
Oh, so you could see then.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
What did you see? Like when you say their cheer performance, what was missing? What can you see? How can you describe
honestly,
that?
for a cheerleader, especially an all-star cheerleader, you get scored and judged off of just your performance in general. Like, even though you did the skill good, you have to perfect it. Like, you know, you have to basically fit the part and look the part. You know, you can't just slap lipstick and bow on somebody and expect them to go on the stage. It was kind of like we expected them to have lipstick and a bow on and put on a great performance. And then it was like, I'm used to this girl having the best facials and the, like, you know, like just that high energetic energy. That's what you're supposed to have when you're a cheerleader. You want to put on a show. You're a performer. But it was like dead. Like their faces were dead. Like a lot of stuff that they love to do, like normal, you know, motions that we've specifically made up for them. They were just like super, just like not lazy, but it was like, you know, this is not you, you know. So what's really going on?
Right. And what were you finding then? Like, so what's really going on? What were people? It sounds like you really have the interviewers touch when it comes to digging. But then what came up of those conversations? What were you hearing?
What came up out of those conversations was, you know, one with like Milani. She was just like, you know, I still feel some type of way. I watch the video and I still see, you know, sometimes when I'll have to, because she has to go past tops, you know, every day. She's like, when I go past there, I just remember the video. And I'm like, that's not something that you should remember. And it was with Nicaire. She was just like, my feelings are hurt. You know, she also did lose somebody related as well. But she was just like, I'm not feeling okay. I'm not feeling okay at all, actually. I want to tell you what's wrong. And she told me, she was just like, I don't even want to go to a funeral. Like, I don't want to go to Tops. I don't want to go to B.A.S.E. I don't want to go anywhere. Why should I have to go somewhere where I don't feel comfortable? Then some of the girls were also involved in schools where it was just like, even after that, there were like silly pranks, like, oh, well, I'm going to come up to your school and do this. And then it was like, they also had those feelings of where does the safety begin or where does it end? They didn't really know what was going on. Like, when I had the initial circle sit down, they were just like, I'm scared to go to school. I'm scared to go grocery shopping now. I don't want to go to Wegmans with my mom. I don't want to go to Tops at all. I told my mom to keep me home when we go grocery shopping. And it was like, no, like, those are the things I started finding out when we started getting into it a little bit more. Those are not answers that I got the first time around when we did that initial circle up. So it took them a couple months to get like deeply embedded in their feelings. And I was like, let me try talking to the girls. And that's just really where it all jump started.
Wow. It's interesting to hear how you're saying that it's not a surprise to hear that young people are impacted, but yet at the same time, we're not necessarily hearing from the young people of Buffalo about this. We've done dozens of interviews here, obviously, with a lot of different people, and we've had great conversations about it. But young people, these are the people that we need to take over next.
And that's exactly why I said it a couple times, like in the podcast. Their voices need to be heard. I don't think anybody expected it to have a ripple effect on the younger generation. Whether that ranges from ages 6 to 18, nobody really thought about the kids afterwards. It was kind of like adult feelings,
Sure.
It was a type of situation where it was like, only adults could feel this way. And it was in reality, it was kind of like I was seeing it firsthand at B.A.S.E. that it was like, no, these kids they feel some type of way too. I also feel a way. And there were just other people, like friends or like just people on social media that were also posting. It was like, I feel a way. And it was like, nobody's listening to the kids. Nobody's listening to us. Our voices are so small compared to an adult, and it was like they never had the opportunity or the chance to be like, I was impacted and I want to tell the story. So
how are the girls doing? Do you sense that, I don't want to say improving, because that's not really the right word I want to get to, but that they're moving through these stages? Do you sense that?
Yes. Some of the girls are definitely moving through, the stages of grief, and they're definitely moving through positive stages. Like they've been picking up, cheers their outlet, but they also been picking up things like, art and poetry as well. Like they've been picking up music. So they've been finding things that have helped with their coping as well. It's sad that they had to go through something for them to feel like they have to pick up other things to feel okay. But some of the girls have definitely taken this and kind of like flipped it. Like Milani and Rakaya, they have flipped it, and now Rakaya, she writes poetry. She does, flag football for school. Milani, she does plays, and, she also does art and things like extracurricular. Our little girls, some of them did have a little bit of a strong feeling, but not like, too much, because they are still like between the ages of 4 and like 8.
Right.
But they've also been like, a little bit more high spirited. And that's also because that comes from us doing the check-ins with them at practice and outside of practice.
We're talking with Nakia McCann this morning on Buffalo What's Next, host of the NPR podcast Embedded Buffalo Extreme. Thank you very much for joining us here on Buffalo What's Next. If you don't mind, I'd like to get into now, because obviously there's a lot of serious elements to this story, but at the same time, there's also a fascination for me about the process of putting this podcast together. Mm-hmm. You're from Buffalo. We're talking about Buffalo. You're down at school at Virginia State. Talk about what it was like producing this podcast. How was this accomplished? I know how hard it is just to do this program every day with 3 of us trying to run it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what this was like.
Honestly, it was really hard. Like, when I talk about it, I definitely have to take a deep breath, because it's something that was not built overnight for sure. Like there was nights where it was like I'm up all day doing schoolwork and I'm also up doing backtracking. Like I'm tired, Like there was weekends where it was like, I do want to go do school activities, but it was like I really want to do this podcast. I don't really care about missing, parties or anything like that. I want to make sure that this podcast was out. The process was such a long process. Like even just when they first pitched it to me, honestly, I was just like, I'm already knowing this is gonna be hard. Like I had my doubts about that too. They kind of made it a little easy, but not really. They worked around my school schedule, but it was also like, we have a job. We have to get this out. Like it was like, there was hours of taping. There was hours of conversation. There was times where I had to take breaks in between. That's just like, it's too intense. There was times like that. The initial process of it is just, it felt like I went through the alphabet, A through Z, honestly. Like, I went through every, emotion. I went through every, like, mental challenge as well and just physical. I'm not used to really talking in front of a microphone and having it, in my face when I say anything, And also, like, just the personal effect of it. Just, we're not used to having any type of media or anything or, I'm not used to having to talk with, my aunt and my mom with a microphone. And also just getting those interviews too was really hard because they're in school and I'm in school. I'm out of state. So it was like, whenever I had time to, I was like, I had this free weekend. Let's go to Buffalo. Let's try to do this,
So you and a producer would come to Buffalo then?
Yes, she would. And it was hard because it was like on days that I was like completely free, they weren't. And it was like days that they were completely free, I weren't. And then just me having to come back and forth from Buffalo, and then I went to a competition, and then I went to Florida. It was really hard trying to balance school and the podcast because it was like, there's no way I could make this 50-50. It was kind of like 100% and 100%. I can't fail school and I can't fail this podcast. So it was like, it was a constant, battle of trying to balance everything. And it was definitely hard because it was nights where I was like, I have to do my schoolwork early in the morning just so we can get this all done by tonight, And also when I was coming back to Buffalo, we had times where it was like, we're meeting at 11 a.m. and we wouldn't get done recording and taping and getting everything together until 12 a.m. Like the next, 12 a.m. Like those are full, shifts. There's breaks in between, of course, but nobody expects you to record in that much time. Then I only had probably like 2 to 3 times where I was in the studio. Most of it was Zoom work. Most of it was just trying to get in person, but most of it was Zoom work. And the other half was like recorded tapes from them and recorded tapes from me. And they sent me with a recorder and I'm just like, what do I do with this? What's going on? Like I was hearing about levels and I'm hearing about different words and vocabulary. And I'm like, okay, I see what this is going to be. It's definitely going to be a big roller coaster, but I'm ready for it. It was one of those roller coasters that you're not scared of. It was kind of like a kiddie roller coaster, but it wasn't like, it was just like that because it was like a kiddie roller coaster, but it was like with a huge ride. Like it just was an ongoing
Kept going.
one. Like it just was the fear of it being a huge roller coaster, but in a kiddie manner. So
Gotcha.
That's just kind of how it felt.
And then you actually went down to the NPR studios in Washington?
Yes, I went down to NPR studios in Washington for 3 days. And out of those 3 days, we worked. I was in the studio recording. I did interviews. But they made it a very comfortable process. Like, if I didn't want to talk about anything at the time, that was a free space for me not to. There was also times where it's like, if I need a mental day, I had a mental day. There were... when I was in D.C., they made it very comfortable for me. Like, Raina and Andrew, they definitely made it very, very comfortable. Like, just the whole schedule in general. And also just seeing how NPR honestly works is kind of weird, too, because it was, like, people working below, and it was also people working in the studios. I'm walking past studios. There's things that I listen to on social media that is based there, like the Tiny Desk. And I was like, oh my God. Like I was kind of fangirling, definitely. And just seeing like a big studio like that, it was kind of weird for me because I classify myself as like a small city girl from Buffalo. Like you don't expect yourself to go from Buffalo to a national podcast, especially, and then go to one of their headquarters in D.C. Like, you don't expect that,
Yeah.
so it was new.
And what about the whole production being put together into this podcast form? As you're talking about it, coming to Buffalo, doing things at school, coming into Washington, D.C., all these different things, going to competitions, all of that's a lot of recordings and a lot of writing and a lot of this and that, and then it all comes together. What can you describe what that feels like and what you saw and how it opened your eyes to some different things?
The feeling of actually hearing everything, especially like the hard nights and stuff like that. And then to think about me hearing my voice is like, oh, I actually remember recording that. And I was on Zoom that day. Or like, it's like, I actually remember recording this and we were, nonstop working this day. Just hearing everything come together. It's like a breath of fresh air, but it's like it doesn't really last too long because as soon as the episode really gets dropped, we bask in it for like a couple hours and it's like it's back to work the next day. But like just the initial process of it being produced, it's a big thing because, things like this doesn't really come out of Buffalo, especially as a Buffalo native. Things like this don't really come about, it's things that other people get chosen for, and not especially like our youth. That's not something that we really get, the spotlight on. So getting the opportunity to hear it produced, my first time honestly hearing everything cut and, scrambled together with the music, it was, like I said, it was refreshing. It felt good to feel that my hard work and my B.A.S.E family's hard work came together and made something that's gonna impact and still people are honestly really listening to. There was also that fear of us putting all this work in and everybody doing this hard work and nobody listened. But in reality, it's like, no, people are really listening and this is real. So
absolutely. Nakia McCann is our guest here on Buffalo What's Next, the host of the NPR podcast Embedded Buffalo Extreme. Check it out for yourself. We got just a little more time together, and I want to touch on maybe a couple other things. First of all, how about for you? Has this been a satisfying experience? Has it been a growing experience?
Yes, it's definitely been a growing experience. I could definitely say I kind of been moving out of my fear of being a public speaker because I really have no choice. But it's definitely a good experience. I've learned a lot of things. I've definitely get in touch with a lot of good resources and people that I've met, and also I met people that like I'll hear on the radio and it's like, oh, I actually see you in person. I could put a name to a face. This whole process has honestly taught me like a lot of things, not only just with school, but just with speaking, is that I can multitask pretty well.
It sounds like you
and
can
I've
multitask.
also been learning better time management. I've also been learning how to stay organized and how to. Usually when I get up in the morning, when I used to get up in the morning, I check social media immediately. Now I feel like when I get up in the morning, I check my email. That's the first thing I check now when I get up, those, emails from either Katie or, Marianne or just small things. It just taught me to be a little bit, I was always responsible, but it taught me to be more responsible, because it's not just my name on the line or it's not just my feelings. It's everybody's that's involved too. And just the responsibility of having to, carry myself to continue carrying myself into a high standard. And it just taught me how to be a little bit more me, because I'm not used to speaking. I'm not used to talking. I'm shy because I don't talk in person. But like, when you get that one-on-one, it's like, oh, you can talk, So I've been peeking into that more, and I'm definitely grateful that I had a chance to do it, and I'm still doing it.
A little more of a serious question, but we kind of touched on this a little bit before about the young people and how they've been impacted by 514 in Buffalo. And sometimes, you're asking a lot of questions about things, but I'm wondering if you've heard ideas or solutions, probably not the right word either, but what can we do for these young people who have been impacted? And it's not just the kids on the B.A.S.E team, and it's kids all over East Side neighborhoods who are probably just like the kids on the B.A.S.E team who have been impacted. What can be done? What should we be doing to help out these kids?
I feel like what should be done is just honestly always offering that helping hand, whether that's one kid that comes or that's 5 kids that come. kids, especially like black kids, they're not used to having, therapy or having that sense of I can communicate. So if you start it young and you start with the youth that's, already here, when they grow up, they'll be, better at talking to a therapist, better at counseling. They won't be so on edge about a lot of things. Their mental will start going down, emotional will start going down. We've talked about this as well in the podcast. Like, a lot of African Americans don't like the sense of having to be in a situation where they have to talk to a therapist. But we've been also learning that if we start them young on it, they'll be more comfortable with doing it. Like Demi and Denver, for an example, they, started into counseling and therapy, and I'm pretty sure when they get older, that'll be something that they can honestly reach into an outlet, a positive way, and not look at it as like, this is for pity, and it's more like, I actually, this person does care about me. This person in the seat does, relate to me and they care. I feel like one thing that Buffalo could definitely do is stop making things a one-time thing. And what I mean by that is just they focus on what happens in the now and what doesn't come after. When that happened, they offered counseling, they offered therapists, but after that, there was nothing else after that week of, the media was gone. People stopped coming to visit. After that, there was no aftercare. Continue caring for these kids after things like this happen, and even when things like this don't happen, continue the aftercare. A lot of people always focus on the negative of our youth and not on the positive, which can be, start just small seminars or make more programs available like B.A.S.E, make more, extracurriculars where students can get in and be like, I don't have anything else to do after school, but at least I can go to B.A.S.E, or at least I can go to, this place and feel okay, or I can feel like, I can do my homework and talk to somebody. It just starts small in the community and not just starting one thing and not continuing it.
You're also a social work major at Virginia
Yes.
State University. Do you see this tying in a lot of
Yes,
ways
I
in some of your
definitely
classes?
see this tying in. I've actually been like using it a little bit in my essays, like, just me taking like psychology classes and, learning different things about different, egos and attitudes and how therapy does help and how, different things correlate with each other. Me being in social work too has honestly helped this process as well, because it's like now I really am invested in my future after I get my degree, which is now do maybe want to go into a therapeutic podcast, or maybe I do want to go into the school system and be, that therapist. Social work and the NPR podcast have definitely tied in a whole bunch, and it's definitely helped me with, my assignments at school, because it's like before I was like, I can't do this because I don't have anything that I can personally relate to, and that's what social work and, social sciences is. It's kind of relating to yourself as well. And I've definitely been doing that. Like some of the questions that I've been getting, like, on my homework or in the essay, it's like I can answer them with a split now, because I also have not just a textbook, perspective, but I also have a perspective of I've been through it and I know people that have also been through it. And I'm actually glad that I'm doing social work, because it definitely tells me that I chose the right major for me.
What made you go into the social work major in the first place? What was that? What was the concept then? It's probably hard to think back now after this year of doing this podcast.
It's always the same thing. Me wanting to go into social work is me being from Buffalo. The fact that there's also a negative look on social work, which is CPS, always taking kids or whatever, but there's also a positive thing to it, which is social services is also there for, therapeutic reasons, which is sometimes I've been learning, like, you get removed from a home for different things. It's not just one thing. I just been learning too that social work, me doing it, is definitely a part of why I want to do it, which is there's not many community service things or community-based things in Buffalo to help kids. And I always said this, when I get my degree and I finally settle on things and be financially, stable, I want to come back to Buffalo and give that back to the, the younger generation in my community. And that just comes from me being in B.A.S.E as well. Like, I've, saw our struggle. I've saw certain kids having to drop because they don't have the finances. I've saw, kids that's just like, they have the deep and love and passion for it, but they just can't do it because of things at home or, stuff like that. So me just being from Buffalo and me seeing things like, especially me living on the east side, it just showed me that there's stuff that needs to be done for younger kids, and it's not being done in the right way. So me being from a small city and just from a city of, especially on the east side, that's mainly violence, and it's mainly like another kid in the streets today, or it's another kid that you see walking by or you see on the news that's like they're in, sadly they lost their lives to violence. And it's like, maybe if we put more community things in the neighborhood, that'll be something where it's like, I saved this kid from going home and doing stuff that they don't have any business. A community center just placed in another area can also just try to stop that barrier of the streets versus real life.
And you kind of answered my question, but you're coming back to Buffalo.
Yes, I plan on coming back after. Hopefully, I get my degree and I find.
I think you're going to get your
job.
degree.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident after talking to you for the last hour. You're going to get that done.
I definitely plan on coming back and trying to see like my options, and definitely work with my aunt, because she runs B.A.S.E as well. She also her fiance, her husband, is also in charge of Crucial. So I've been like looking.
What's Crucial?
It's a community center.
Okay.
That they've been with each other. Like, that's been a thing even before B.A.S.E was there as well. I just plan on, after getting my degree, that I can come back in, even if it's just a small thing with me starting a scholarship at B.A.S.E, because I've been actually thinking about it, is putting a scholarship in my name and having, them decide, and also me decide who will be best fit for it. It's not even about just best cheer ability. It's also about what makes you, you, and what makes you a good cheerleader. I've been, looking into research on how to give scholarships, and also trying to find the finances, like, keep the finances as well, because that's my next step, is trying to, after I get my degree, is hopefully putting a scholarship in my name, not only just for B.A.S.E kids, started for the B.A.S.E kids, but then hopefully turning into like a real scholarship one day.
And finally, what about the value of doing cheerleading and dance at a place like B.A.S.E or at B.A.S.E? We can give them a bit of a plug here.
Honestly, the value of doing cheer at B.A.S.E has changed me in a lot of different ways. Like, just with my confidence and me feeling like I can do anything, which is just from, the coaching staff, my aunt, my mom. Like, I feel like if you put kids into things that they want to do early, you set them up for greater success. Especially when you put them in things like B.A.S.E, which is, a predominantly black gym. You put them in things where representation is trend, like, it's there every day. The importance and the value of cheerleading, especially with All-Star cheer is definitely a sport. Anything that you put your body through, mentally, physically, and emotionally, is definitely a sport. Cheer is one of those values where it teaches you not only respect and integrity, but it also teaches you how to work with other people.
And I was just, as you were talking about the competitions, I was going to maybe have you talk a little bit about what happened with the competitions, but maybe we shouldn't. Be a little bit of a spoiler, right, for people who haven't heard the podcast, right?
I definitely recommend, if you want to hear about the competitions, listening to the podcast.
It's a story worth hearing, isn't it?
It's definitely a story worth hearing. It's definitely a little turning point in the podcast.
Excellent. Wow. Nakia McCann, thanks so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
It was an absolute pleasure. Nakia, and I've got to meet a national podcast host, which I'm thrilled. I'm all starry-eyed about that. Yes, Nakia McCann is from Buffalo. She's a student at Virginia State University, and she is also the host of the NPR podcast Embedded Buffalo Extreme. This has been Buffalo What's Next on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown, your NPR station.